He was the king of the north, a beast woven from shadow and iron. She was the Omega the pack forgot, the healer who lived in silence. But when the storm strips a king of his crown, he doesn't command. He begs. Welcome back, my royal hearts. If you are ready to witness the moment an alpha breaks, make sure you are subscribed and the notification bell is ringing. The storm is here. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Ghost in the Snow. The wind didn't just blow, it hunted. It shrieked around the corners of Kayla's dilapidated cabin, searching for a way in, rattling the heavy wooden shutters like a wolf testing a cage. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of drying sage and lonely endurance. Kayla, the pack's forgotten Omega, stirred her cauldron of bone broth. She was used to the silence. In fact, she preferred it to the sneers of the high-ranking wolves who only sought her out when they needed a wound stitched or a fever broken. Here, on the edge of the unforgiving woods, she was nobody. And nobody was safe. But the rhythm of the storm was broken by a sound that stopped her heart, a wet, heavy thud against her door. Kayla froze. No one came this far out. Not in a blizzard that could freeze the breath in your lungs. She grabbed the iron poker from the hearth, her Omega instincts screaming hide, but her healer's soul whispering help. She threw the latch and shoved the door open. The wind hit her like a physical blow, a wall of white ice. And there, collapsed on her threshold, was a mountain of a man. He was massive, his frame taking up the entire doorway. His furs were shredded, not by the wind, but by claws, deep jagged rents that oozed blood so dark it looked like tar against the pristine snow. He was face down, motionless, already half buried by the drifts. Kayla dropped the poker. She knew that scent. Even through the copper tang of blood and the crisp bite of frost, she smelled power. Cedarwood, rain, and the terrified ozone smell of a storm about to break. By the goddess, she whispered, grabbing his arm. It was like gripping a tree trunk. He was Drew. The alpha of the Blood Iron Pack. The man who ruled the territory with a gaze that could strip the flesh from your bones. And he was dying on her welcome mat. It took every ounce of her meager strength to drag him inside. She dug her heels into the rough floorboards, pulling until her muscles burned, finally hauling his dead weight clear of the door. She kicked it shut, sealing out the screaming wind. The silence that returned was heavy. Drew lay on her rug, a broken god. His skin was gray, his lips blue. The alpha aura that usually forced Omegas like her to their knees was gone, replaced by the fragile, terrifying stillness of mortality. Kayla fell to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over the ruin of his chest. "Do not die," she commanded, her voice shaking. "Do not die in my house, Alpha." She reached for the ties of his tunic. His skin was ice-cold to the touch. He wasn't just injured, he was hypothermic. The cold had seeped into his marrow. As she worked, frantically stripping away the frozen, blood-stained layers, his eyes flew open. They were silver, molten, delirious mercury. They didn't see her. They saw enemies. A low, rumbling growl started in his chest, vibrating into her palms. "Easy," she soothed, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You are safe." He blinked, the silver dulling to a haze. He tried to rise, his massive shoulders bunching, but he collapsed back with a groan that sounded more like a sob. The Alpha, the warrior who had never bowed to anyone, looked up at the ceiling of the humble shack, totally helpless. Chapter 2. Skin Hunger. The cabin was warm, but Drew was shivering so violently his teeth clicked together, a sharp, skeletal sound in the small room. Kayla worked with the efficiency of a master. She had cleaned the claw marks across his torso, 3 deep valleys carved through muscle, and packed them with a paste of yarrow and honey. But the wounds weren't the immediate killer. The cold was. "I can't get you warm enough," she muttered to herself, throwing another log on the fire until the flames roared. She piled her own bed furs onto him, heavy wool and bearskin, but he continued to shake. It was the tremors of a body shutting down. She looked at him. He was a landscape of scars and muscle, a weapon forged for war, now reduced to a trembling mess. His mind was drifting in and out of the fever lands. "Mother," he rasped, his voice a broken gravel. "Cold." Kayla bit her lip. She knew the remedy. It was the old way. When the body forgets how to make heat, it must borrow it. But to do that, she looked at the door, then back at him. She was an Omega. To touch an alpha like this, skin to skin, without an invitation, was a crime punishable by exile or death. But if she let him die, the guilt would kill her anyway. "Forgive me, Alpha," she whispered. With trembling fingers, she untied her simple linen dress. It pooled at her feet, leaving her in her shift. The air in the cabin nipped at her skin, but she ignored it. She climbed under the mountain of furs, sliding in beside him. The shock of his cold skin against hers made her gasp. He felt like a statue left out in winter. She didn't shy away. She pressed her softness against his hardness, wrapping her limbs around his freezing form. She pulled his head to rest on her chest, her hands rubbing friction into his icy back. "Take it," she murmured into his matted dark hair. "Take the warmth. I have plenty." For a long time, there was only the sound of the fire and his ragged breathing. Slowly, painfully, the heat transfer began. She felt the tension in his muscles begin to unspool. The violent shivering subsided into occasional tremors. Then, he shifted. His nose brushed the sensitive skin of her neck. He inhaled, a deep, desperate drag of air. To a wolf, scent is everything. And Kayla didn't smell like fear anymore. She smelled like vanilla, hearth smoke, and life. His arm, heavy as an iron bar, moved sluggishly across her waist, pinning her to him. It wasn't an act of aggression, it was an act of desperate anchoring. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, his cold nose seeking the pulse that thrummed there. "Warm," he groaned, the word vibrating against her collarbone. Kayla stiffened. He was waking up. He was realizing that the soft, small thing in his arms was the Omega he had ignored for years. "Rest, Drew," she whispered, using his name for the first time. He pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were clearer now, focusing on her face in the firelight. He looked at her mouth, then her eyes. Confusion warred with instinct. He didn't push her away. Instead, he pulled her closer, his grip bruising in its intensity. "You," he whispered, as if he were discovering a new species. "You are the fire." Chapter 3: The Desperate Beg. The fever hit an hour later. It was a violent backlash from the infection and the rapid thawing. Drew thrashed in the furs, groaning in agony. His skin, previously ice-cold, was now burning up. He was hallucinating, fighting phantom battles with enemies Kayla couldn't see. "No!" he roared, flailing an arm that nearly took Kayla's head off. "Hold the line. Do not let them pass." "Drew!" Kayla shouted, straddling his hips to pin him down. It was a ridiculous image. The small healer trying to hold down a berserker. "You are not at war. Look at me." He stopped thrashing. He blinked up at her, sweat beading on his forehead, his hair plastered to his skull. The pain in his eyes was bottomless. It wasn't just physical pain, it was a soul-deep ache, a loneliness that matched her own. "It hurts," he rasped, clutching at his chest where the claw marks burned. "The cold. It's still inside." "I know," she soothed, taking a damp cloth to wipe his brow. "The fever is fighting the poison." He caught her wrist. His grip was weak, trembling but desperate. His eyes, usually so arrogant, were wide and wet. "Help me," he whispered. I feel like I am drifting away." "I am here," she promised. "I need." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked at her with a raw, terrifying hunger. Not for sex, but for connection. For proof he was alive. "I need to feel you. Not the cloth. You." Kayla hesitated. "I am holding you, Alpha." "No," he groaned, his head tossing on the pillow. "Closer. Skin. Please." His hand moved down, fumbling with the hem of her shift. He wasn't trying to strip her, he was trying to find an anchor point. His fingers brushed her thigh, burning hot. "Just." He choked on the words, his pride fighting a losing battle with his need. "Just the tip." Kayla froze. "What?" His eyes locked onto hers, burning with feverish intensity. "Just the tip of your finger. Inside my mouth." It was an intimate, almost pup-like request. Wolves soothed each other through taste, through touch. He needed to taste her essence to ground himself against the hallucinations. "Please," he begged, the word shattering the last of his composure. "Just the tip. Let me taste that you are real. I am drowning, Kayla. Don't let me drown." It was the use of her name that undid her. He remembered her. Slowly, trembling, she lifted her hand. She extended her index finger. He watched it like a starving man watches a feast. As she brought it to his lips, he didn't snap. He opened his mouth slowly, his eyes fluttering shut. He took the tip of her finger into his mouth. He sucked gently, his tongue swirling around the digit. It was erotic, yes, but overwhelmingly tender. It was a plea for life. A connection that bridged the gap between Alpha and Omega. Kayla felt a jolt of electricity shoot from her finger straight to her womb. She gasped. Drew groaned, a sound of pure relief, his shoulders dropping as the taste of her, salt and herbs and female, grounded his spinning world. "Real," he mumbled against her skin. "You are real." Chapter 4. The morning after. Dawn arrived not with sunlight, but with a gray, diffused glow through the shutters. The storm had quieted to a sullen moan. Kayla woke with a stiff neck. She was curled in the wooden chair beside the bed. At some point in the night, after the fever broke, she had extricated herself from the Alpha's grip to give him space. She looked at the bed. Drew was awake. He was sitting up, the furs pooled at his waist. His chest was bandaged, the white linen stark against his tan skin. He was staring at his hands, clenching and unclenching them. The vulnerability of the night before was gone, replaced by a stone-faced rigidity. He sensed her waking. His head snapped toward her. The silver eyes were sharp again, calculating, guarded. "You saved me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered without emotion. "You were dying on my doorstep," Kayla replied, her voice raspy from sleep. She stood up, smoothing her wrinkled dress, suddenly conscious of how intimate they had been. "I did what any healer would do." "No," Drew corrected, his voice dropping an octave. "You did what a mate would do." The air left the room. "I am not your mate, Alpha," she said quickly, turning to the hearth to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. "And you were delirious with fever. You didn't know who I was." "I knew," he said. The sound of shifting furs told her he was trying to stand. "Don't," she warned, turning back. "Your stitches will tear." He ignored her, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. He stood, swaying slightly, towering over the small room. He looked at her, really looked at her, with a predatory intensity that made her knees weak. "I remember the cold," he said, taking a step toward her. "I remember the pain. And I remember begging." Kayla flinched. "We don't have to speak of it. You were not yourself." "I was exactly myself," Drew countered, taking another step. He was crowding her now, his scent of pine and musk filling her nose. "A man stripped of his titles is just a man. And that man needed you." He reached into the pouch at his belt, which lay on the table. He pulled out a heavy gold ring, the signet of his house. He placed it on the table with a heavy clink. "Payment," he said, his face hardening. "For the services. For the warmth." Kayla stared at the ring. Then she looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. The tenderness of the night vanished, replaced by the cold reality of their stations. He was trying to buy his dignity back. He was trying to turn their shared survival into a transaction. "Is that what you think happened here?" she asked, her voice quiet but shaking with anger. "You think I warmed you for coin? You think I let you taste my skin for a ring?" Drew's jaw tightened. "I am an alpha. I do not owe debts. I pay them." "Take it," she spat, pointing at the ring. "I am an outcast, Drew, but I am not a whore. My heat is not for sale. If you want to pay me, leave. Get out of my house." The rejection hit him like a physical slap. He looked at the ring, then at the furious, trembling woman before him. He had expected her to be grateful. He had expected submission. Instead, he found fire. Chapter 5. Cabin Fever. He didn't leave. He couldn't. Drew had tried to open the door, only to find a wall of snow packed 5 feet high against it. The blizzard had buried them alive. Until the sun melted the drift, or until he regained enough strength to dig them out, they were trapped in a box of wood and silence. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. Kayla moved around him like he was a dangerous piece of furniture. She cooked a simple stew of root vegetables and dried venison, chopping the carrots with aggressive force. Drew sat by the fire, brooding, the gold ring still sitting untouched on the table between them like a declaration of war. "You are angry," he said finally, watching her back. "I am busy," she retorted, dumping the vegetables into the pot. "Kayla." She froze. Hearing her name in his low, command-heavy voice sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. She turned to face him. "Why did you come here, Drew?" she asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "Why were you alone in the storm? Where is your guard? Where is your beta?" Drew looked into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes, dancing over secrets he clearly didn't want to share. "Betrayal," he said simply. "The pack. There is a rot in the center. I was lured out. Ambushed. They thought the Stonefist clan killed me. They don't know I crawled away." Kayla softened. "You are being hunted by your own?" "I am being hunted by those who want the throne," he corrected. He looked up at her. "Which means you are in danger. Just by my being here, I have painted a target on your back." "I have been invisible for years," Kayla said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Maybe being seen is a nice change of pace." Drew snorted, a dry, humorless sound. "Not by these men. They do not see a woman. They see a weakness to be exploited." He stood up, groaning slightly as his wounds stretched. He walked over to her, stopping inches away. The size difference was overwhelming. He had to tilt his head down to look at her, she had to crane her neck back. "I insulted you," he said quietly. "With the ring. It was a defense mechanism. I am not used to needing anyone. I am not used to begging." "I know," she whispered. "But I am still the alpha," he murmured, his voice dropping to a velvet rumble. He reached out, his large, rough hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed her lower lip, echoing the intimacy of the night before. "And now that I am not dying, I find that my hunger has not faded. It has only changed form." Kayla's breath hitched. "Changed to what?" His eyes dropped to her lips. "To a craving. I told you, Kayla. You are the fire. And I have been cold for a very long time." He didn't kiss her. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of intimacy that was far more dangerous than a kiss. "We are trapped," he whispered. "The world thinks I am dead. For the next few days, I am not the alpha. I am just a man in a room with a beautiful woman who saved his life. And I am asking you, don't make me beg again, because I will." Chapter 6. The Cage of Gold and Wood. The silence of the snowed-in cabin should have been peaceful. Instead, it was a living, breathing thing, heavy with unsaid words and the electric hum of 2 predators circling one another in a cage. 2 days had passed. 2 days of forced proximity. 2 days of Drew watching Kayla with eyes that tracked her every movement like a wolf tracking a hare in the moonlight. Kayla stood by the small wooden table, kneading dough for bread. The rhythmic thump, drag, fold was the only sound in the room. She could feel his gaze on her back, a physical weight warm and prickly. "You are tense," Drew's voice cut through the air. He was sitting by the hearth, whittling a piece of firewood with a small knife she had given him. He moved with a restless energy, his alpha nature chafing against the confinement. "I am not used to an audience," Kayla replied without turning. "Especially not one that takes up half the room. And I am not used to sitting still while a woman works." The chair scraped against the floorboards. Kayla stiffened as he approached. The heat radiating from him was palpable before he even touched her. He didn't grab her. Instead, he came to stand directly behind her, his chest inches from her back, caging her between his massive body and the table. He reached around her, his large, scarred hands covering hers on the dough. "Let me," he murmured, his breath stirring the loose strands of hair at her temple. His hands were rough, calloused from sword and rain, contrasting sharply with her flour-dusted skin. He pressed down, his strength effortless as he kneaded the dough. Kayla's breath hitched. It was such a domestic act, yet the way he did it, pressing his body into hers with every push, made it feel obscenely intimate. "You have strong hands for a healer," he noted, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her spine. "I have to drag wood, carry water, and grind roots," she managed to say, her voice shaky. "Survival makes you strong, Alpha. Not all strength is for war." "No," he agreed, his nose brushing against her ear. He inhaled deeply, taking in her scent. "Some strength is for endurance. You have endured much, haven't you, little Omega?" The term little Omega usually made her bristle. It was a diminutive used by the elite to mock her station. But from his mouth, it didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like a claim. A possessive endearment. "I have survived," she corrected. "There is a difference." Drew paused. He rested his chin on the top of her head, his arms still bracketing her, effectively trapping her against the counter. "I have spent my life surrounded by wolves who would tear out my throat for a scrap of power," he whispered, the vibration traveling down her body. "But here, with you, I feel something I have not felt since I was a pup." "And what is that?" Kayla asked, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Peace," he admitted, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "And it terrifies me." He turned her around in his arms, his flour-dusted hands sliding up to cup her face. The intensity in his silver eyes was scorching. "You asked me not to make you a whore," he rasped. "I won't. But do not ask me to stop wanting you. The beast inside me. He thinks we are already mated. He thinks this cabin is our den." Kayla looked up at him, trapped in the halo of his heat. "And the man? What does he think?" Drew leaned down, his lips hovering millimeters from hers. "The man thinks he would burn the world down just to stay in this snowstorm with you for one more hour." Chapter 7, Maps on Skin. Later that evening, the dynamic shifted from simmering tension to stark vulnerability. Drew sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless. The firelight played across the landscape of his torso, a roadmap of violence. There were old, silver lines from knives, jagged starbursts from arrows, and the fresh, angry red of the claw marks she had stitched. Kayla knelt between his spread knees, a jar of salve in her hand. The intimacy of the position was not lost on either of them. Her face was level with his chest, his thighs bracketed her hips. "This will sting," she warned, dipping her fingers into the pungent green balm. "Do your worst, healer," he grunted, his hands gripping the edge of the mattress until his knuckles turned white. She spread the salve over the wounds. He hissed through his teeth, his abdominal muscles contracting sharply under her touch. Kayla worked slowly, her touch featherlight, trying to soothe the pain she was inflicting. "Who did this?" she asked softly, tracing a particularly nasty, jagged scar that ran from his ribs to his hip. "This one is old." Drew looked down at her, his eyes dark. "My father. To teach me a lesson about hesitation." Kayla's hand faltered. She looked up, horror in her eyes. "He was your alpha." "He was a tyrant," Drew corrected. "He believed pain was the only teacher. He made me into a weapon, Kayla. Hard, sharp, and cold." He reached out, capturing her hand as it rested on his heart. "Until you." He pulled her hand up to his lips, kissing the fingertips that were stained with healing herbs. "You touch me and you don't flinch," he marveled. "Why? Everyone flinches. Everyone fears the king of the north." "I see the blood, Drew," she said softly. "But I also see the man bleeding. You are not just a weapon to me." The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a sudden spike in pheromones. Drew's pupils dilated, swallowing the silver. The scent of need, spicy, dark, and overwhelming, flooded the small space. "Kayla," he groaned, the sound torn from his throat. He pulled her forward. She went willingly, her hands resting on his shoulders. He buried his face in her stomach, inhaling her scent through the fabric of her dress. "I want to taste you again," he confessed, his voice muffled against her body. "Not just your finger. All of you. I want to know if you taste as sweet as you smell." "We can't," she whispered, though her fingers were already threading through his dark hair, scratching lightly at his scalp in a way she knew wolves loved. "You are still healing. And I am still an outcast." "Titles mean nothing in here," he growled, looking up. His eyes were glowing faintly, the wolf surfacing. "Right now, there is only hunger. Please. Just let me see." His hands moved to the hem of her tunic. He didn't pull it up. He just held the fabric, his thumbs rubbing circles against her thigh, asking for permission. The beg was back in his eyes, that desperate, shattered plea that had broken her defenses the first night. "I need to see the skin that warms me," he whispered. "Just a glimpse. Feed the beast, Kayla, before he tears me apart." Slowly, with trembling hands, Kayla nodded. Drew pushed the fabric up, inch by agonizing inch, revealing her knees, her thighs, the curve of her hips. He didn't touch her skin yet. He just looked, with a reverence that made her feel like a deity. "Perfect," he breathed. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to the inside of her knee, a spot so tender it made her gasp. "Mine." Chapter 8, The Howl in the Wind. The bubble burst at midnight. Kayla was asleep, curled on the rug by the fire. Drew had insisted she take the bed, but she had refused, yielding the soft mattress to his injuries. He had eventually fallen asleep watching her. But a sound woke them both. It wasn't the wind. It was a sound that triggered a primal, genetic panic in every wolf's brain. A howl. But not a howl of greeting. This was a hunting cry. High, sharp, and dissonant. Drew was out of the bed in a second, the pain of his injuries ignored. He was instantly the alpha general again. He moved to the window, peering through the crack in the shutter. "They found us," he said, his voice void of all warmth. Kayla scrambled up, clutching her blanket. "The storm covered our tracks." "How?" "Shadow trackers," Drew cursed, turning from the window. "They use magic, not scent. My beta Rurik. He must have hired the witches of the crag." He turned to her. The lover who had kissed her knee was gone. In his place was a wall of muscle and violence. "Pack your things," he commanded. "Medicines. Dried food. Furs. We leave now." "Leave." Kayla gestured to the door. "Drew, the snow is 5 feet deep. We will freeze." "If we stay, we die," he said, grabbing his sword belt. "Rurik doesn't want prisoners. He wants my head on a pike and he will burn this cabin to the ground to get it. I will not let you burn, Kayla." He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was bruising. "Listen to me. You know these woods. You are the outcast. You have walked paths the warriors ignore. Is there a way out? A way the horses cannot follow?" Kayla's mind raced. Panic fluttered in her throat, but she shoved it down. She was a survivor. "The Whispering Caves," she said breathless. "They are treacherous. Unstable. No warrior goes there because the echoes drive them mad. But there is a tunnel that leads to the southern ridge. Can you navigate it?" "Yes." "Then lead," he said, releasing her. "I will cover your back. If they come close, run. Do not look back for me. Do you understand?" "No," Kayla said firmly, grabbing her satchel and shoving jars of frostwort and sunspark bloom into it. She turned to him, eyes blazing. "You do not get to order me to leave you behind. We survived the storm together. We survive this together." Drew looked at her, a fierce pride warring with fear in his eyes. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, a silent pact of equals. "Together," he agreed. He kicked the door open. The snow had settled enough to crawl through. The cold night air rushed in, extinguishing the fire, the hearth that had been their whole world for 3 days. They stepped out into the dark, leaving the sanctuary behind. Chapter 9, Blood in the Snow. The run was a nightmare of blue shadows and biting wind. The snow was thigh-deep. Every step was a battle. Drew, despite his immense strength, was flagging. The wound in his chest had reopened, staining his tunic, but he didn't make a sound. He plowed the path, using his massive body to break the drifts so Kayla could follow in his wake. Behind them, the howls grew closer. Torches flickered through the tree line like angry fireflies. Faster, Drew gritted out, his breath coming in white plumes. We are almost there, Kayla gasped. Her lungs felt like they were filled with glass shards. They reached the edge of the ravine. Below, a narrow, icy ledge wound its way down into darkness, the entrance to the Whispering Caves. There. Kayla pointed. But before they could move, a dark shape launched itself from the tree line above them. It was a wolf, huge, gray, and snarling. One of Roaric's elites. It didn't shift into human form, it went straight for the kill. Drew didn't hesitate. He roared, a sound that shook snow from the branches, and threw himself in front of Kayla. He caught the attacking wolf mid-air. The impact sent them both rolling into the snow. Snaps of jaws and tearing of fabric filled the air. Drew was weakened, slower than usual. The enemy wolf clamped its jaws onto Drew's forearm, shaking its head to tear the muscle. Drew! Kayla screamed. She didn't run. She reached into her satchel. She pulled out a jar of fire dust, dried peppers and blinding spores she used for aggressive treatments. She scrambled toward the tangled bodies. The enemy wolf was on top, going for Drew's throat. Kayla didn't think. She lunged, smashing the jar directly into the wolf's face. The wolf yelped, a high-pitched sound of agony as the powder burned its eyes and nose. It released Drew, thrashing and pouring at its face. Move! Drew bellowed, rolling to his feet. He didn't waste time killing the blinded beast. He grabbed Kayla's waist and jumped. They slid down the icy embankment, a terrifying, uncontrolled descent into the dark throat of the ravine. They hit the bottom hard, rolling into the mouth of the cave just as arrows began to rain down from the ridge above, clicking harmlessly against the stone. They were inside. The darkness swallowed them. Chapter 10: The Fever of the Bond. The cave was silent, save for the dripping of water and their ragged, desperate breathing. They were safe, for the moment. The entrance was too narrow for a shifted wolf to fight effectively, and the acoustics of the cave distorted sound, making it impossible for the trackers to pinpoint them. Drew slumped against the cold stone wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. Blood dripped from his arm and his chest. Kayla dropped her bag and fell to her knees beside him. Let me see. It's nothing, he wheezed, but his skin was burning hot again. Not fever this time. Adrenaline. And something else. The chase. The violence. The protective instinct triggered by the threat to his female. It had awakened the rut. In wolf biology, extreme danger coupled with proximity to a potential mate could trigger a biological override. A need to claim. To ensure the lineage continued before death. Drew's eyes were glowing a vibrant, terrifying gold. He looked at Kayla not as a healer, but as the only thing in the world that mattered. Kayla, he warned, his voice a guttural growl that skittered along her nerve endings. Stay back. You are bleeding, she insisted, reaching for his arm. He caught her wrist. His grip was iron. He pulled her close, not gently this time. He pinned her against the cave wall, his body covering hers. I told you, he snarled, his face buried in her neck, inhaling deeply. The beast is awake. The fight. The blood. It makes it harder to control. Drew. Kayla's heart hammered. She should be afraid. An alpha in a rut was dangerous, driven by pure instinct. But she wasn't afraid. She felt a pulling in her own gut, her omega biology answering his call. I need. He groaned, pressing his hips against hers. The evidence of his arousal was undeniable, hard and demanding against her stomach. I need to know you are mine. The fear. I thought I lost you. I am here, she whispered, her hands coming up to cup his face. She didn't push him away. She pulled him down. I am not a gentleman tonight, Kayla, he warned, his lips brushing hers, hot and frantic. If you let me kiss you now, I will not stop at the tip. I will not stop until I have claimed every inch of you. Kayla looked into the gold eyes of the wolf who had begged for her, fought for her, and bled for her. She saw the desperation. She saw the love he was too stubborn to name. Then don't stop, she breathed. The last thread of his restraint snapped. He didn't ask again. He crushed his mouth to hers, a kiss of possession, of survival, of a desperate alpha finally coming home. It was messy, bloody, and perfect. The cave echoed not with the sounds of war, but with the sounds of a king claiming his queen in the dark. Chapter 11. The Sacred Dark. The cave was a void, stripped of light and time, but within the circle of Drew's arms, Kayla found a blinding, terrified clarity. The stone floor was unforgiving, damp and freezing, yet she felt none of it. Her world had narrowed to the heat of the alpha pressing her against the limestone, his heart hammering a frantic war drum against her own chest. This was not the gentle, hesitant fumbling of their first night. This was a collision. Drew was consumed by the rut, a biological imperative that stripped away the king and left only the wolf. He didn't just kiss her, he devoured her, his mouth hot and demanding, tasting of iron and desperation. He was trembling, not from cold, but from the sheer force of restraining his own strength, terrified he might break the very thing he sought to claim. "Mine," he growled against her throat, the vibration rattling her teeth. "Say it. Tell the dark. Tell the ghosts in this cave. Who do you belong to?" "Yours," Kayla gasped, her fingers digging into the hard muscle of his shoulders, anchoring herself as the sensation threatened to sweep her away. "I am yours, Drew." The confession snapped the last tether of his control. He moved with a predator's efficiency, lifting her hips, wrapping her legs around his waist. The friction, the heat, the overwhelming scent of pine and arousal filled the cavern. When they finally joined, it wasn't a slow slide, it was a desperate fusion. A gasp tore from Kayla's throat, echoed by Drew's guttural roar, a sound of pain and pleasure so intertwined they were indistinguishable. It was an exorcism of loneliness. For years, she had been the invisible Omega, the healer no one touched. For years, he had been the frozen alpha, the weapon no one held. Now, in the dark, those identities shattered. As the rhythm took them, a strange phenomenon began. The air around them shimmered. The whispering caves were known for their magic, and the intense energy of an alpha and omega bonding in such a high magic zone triggered a reaction. The bioluminescent moss on the ceiling flared to life, casting them in a spectral blue glow. Drew paused, breathless, his forehead resting against hers. He felt it too, a physical snap in the air, like a static shock that went bone deep. "Do you feel that?" he rasped, his eyes squeezing shut as a wave of euphoria washed over him. "The tether." "I feel you," Kayla whispered, tears pricking her eyes. She didn't just feel him physically, she felt him. A flood of emotions that weren't hers poured into her mind, his fear of failing the pack, his exhaustion, and underneath it all, a blinding, worshipful gratitude for her. He pulled back to look at her, his golden eyes wide with wonder. He moved his hand to the junction of her neck and shoulder, the mating gland. "Let me seal it," he begged, his voice cracking. "Let me keep you. Forever." Kayla tilted her head back, baring her throat. It was the ultimate surrender. "Bite, Alpha." He sank his teeth into the soft skin. The pain was sharp, immediate, and then instantly replaced by a flood of golden warmth that cascaded through her veins like liquid sunlight. They were no longer two. They were one. Chapter 12. The Voices in the Stone. Waking up in the whispering caves was usually a death sentence. The legends said the caves amplified your darkest fears, whispering them until you walked off a ledge just to make it stop. Kayla woke to the sound of voices. "You are weak. He only wants you for your heat. You are a tool. A bandage to be discarded." She gasped, sitting up, her heart racing. The voices were slithering inside her ear canals. But then, a warm, heavy hand clamped over her shoulder. Silence. The bad thoughts vanished, replaced by a steady, mental hum of safety. Warmth. Mine. She looked down. Drew was awake, watching her. He looked different. The gray pallor of near-death was gone. His skin was flushed with health, his eyes clear and sharp. The bond had healed him. The exchange of energy during the mating had kick-started his alpha regeneration. "The caves," he said, his voice rough with sleep but steady. "They try to separate us." "I heard them," Kayla shivered, pulling his fur cloak tighter around her naked shoulders. "They told me you would leave me." Drew sat up, ignoring his own bandages. He reached out, tracing the fresh, red bite mark on her neck with his thumb. A spark of possessive satisfaction flared in his eyes. "They lie," he said simply. "I can hear your fear, Kayla. It's loud. But listen to me." He tapped his own temple. "Listen to my truth." He dropped his mental shields, a skill usually reserved for the highest-ranking elders. He let her in completely. Kayla gasped. It wasn't a voice, it was a feeling. An image. It was a memory of her standing in the snow, defiant. It was the feeling of her hand on his chest. It was a monolithic, unshakable conviction that she was the center of his gravity. "Oh," she breathed. "We have to move," Drew said, shifting into warrior mode, though he paused to kiss her forehead tenderly. "The bond healed my body, but we are still hunted. And now that I have claimed you, Rurik will smell you on me. He will know he cannot use me as a puppet anymore." Because an unmated alpha is unstable, Kayla recited the old laws. "But a mated alpha is a king," Drew finished. He stood, extending a hand to her. "Come, my queen. We have a pack to reclaim. The way out, you said there was a tunnel." "The southern ridge," Kayla nodded, taking his hand. "But it's narrow. We'll have to crawl." Drew smirked, a dangerous, wolfish expression returning to his face. "I'll follow you anywhere, Kayla. Even into the dirt." Chapter 13, The Ascendant. They emerged from the earth 3 hours later, covered in grey dust and looking like vengeful spirits rising from the grave. The exit opened onto a high ridge overlooking the Frostfang Valley. Below them, the fortress of the pack sprawled out, dark smoke curling from the chimneys. From this distance, it looked peaceful. But Drew stiffened, his nose twitching. "Smoke," he murmured. "Not hearth smoke. Torches." "They are gathering the pack," Kayla said, shielding her eyes against the glare of the snow. "Rurik must be announcing your death. Then we are just in time to crash the funeral." Drew turned to her. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small dagger, her dagger, which she had used to cut herbs. He placed it in her hand. "Kayla," he said, his tone serious. "When we go down there, they will challenge us. They will see an Omega standing beside an Alpha and they will laugh. They will call you a whore. They will call you a witch." "I have been called worse," Kayla said, gripping the hilt. "I know," Drew's eyes softened. "But today, you do not lower your head. You do not step behind me. You walk beside me. If anyone touches you, anyone, you cut them. Do you understand? I will handle the rest, but you must show them you are not prey." "I am not prey," she repeated, the bond humming with his confidence. "I am the one who saved the king." "Good." Drew stripped off his ruined, blood-crusted tunic, leaving his chest bare to the freezing wind. The claw marks were pink, half-healed scars now. The bite mark she had left on his shoulder, a reciprocal claim she had made in the heat of the moment, was stark against his skin. He wanted them to see it. He wanted them to see the scars and the claim. "Let's go," he growled. They descended the ridge, not sneaking, but walking openly down the main road. Drew let his alpha aura loose. Usually, he kept it dampened to avoid frightening the pups. Now he let it roll off him in waves, a crushing pressure of dominance that flattened the snow and sent birds taking flight from the trees. It was a beacon. "I am here. I am alive. And I am furious." Chapter 14, The Walk of Fire. The gates of the fortress were barred. 2 guards stood atop the wall. They were laughing, sharing a flask, until the pressure hit them. One guard choked on his wine. He looked down the road and turned pale. "Open the gate." Drew's voice didn't shout, but it carried like thunder, amplified by the alpha command. The guards scrambled, tripping over themselves. The massive wooden gates groaned open. Drew and Kayla walked through. The courtyard was packed. Rurik stood on the Alpha's elevated platform, wearing Drew's ceremonial cloak. He was in the middle of a speech. "A tragedy," Rurik was saying, feigning sorrow. "The Stonefist clan has taken our leader. We must." "You must what, Rurik?" The voice cut through the crowd like a blade. The silence that followed was absolute. The crowd parted like water as Drew strode forward, Kayla matching his pace step for step. Gasps rippled through the pack. They saw the Alpha, shirtless, scarred, glowing with power. And they saw the Omega. Kayla, the herb grinder, walking at his right hand, her head held high, a dagger at her hip, and the scent of the Alpha drenched all over her. Rurik froze. His eyes darted from Drew's face to the mating mark on Kayla's neck. His sneer faltered into a grimace of fear. Drew, Rurik stammered. We thought you were dead. The scouts found blood. You found the blood you paid for, Drew said, stopping at the base of the platform. He didn't look up at Rurik, he looked through him. Get off my platform. Now brother, Rurik tried to rally, descending the stairs with a forced smile. Let's not make accusations. We are just glad you are safe. But... He paused, his eyes flicking to Kayla with disdain. Why have you brought the servant girl? Is she carrying your bags? The insult hung in the air. Drew didn't speak. He reached out and pulled Kayla flush against his side, his arm wrapping around her waist. Look closely, Rurik, Drew said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. Smell the air. The pack inhaled. They smelled it. The intertwined scent. Pine and vanilla. Rain and herbs. The undeniable, chemical signature of a true mate bond. She is not a servant, Drew announced, his voice booming so the back rows could hear. She is the reason I am breathing. She dragged me from the snow when you left me to rot. She is my mate. And your Luna. A Luna. Rurik laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Her? She is a defect. An Omega runt. The bloodline cannot. Drew moved faster than sight. One moment he was standing, the next, his hand was wrapped around Roarik's throat, lifting the beta off the ground. Speak of her with respect, Drew snarled, his eyes glowing gold, or I will rip your tongue out and feed it to the crows. He threw Rurik into the mud. Drew turned to the pack, chest heaving. I am back, he roared. And the pack is under new management. Chapter 15, The Council of Shadows. The victory in the courtyard was decisive, but the war was far from over. Physical dominance was one thing, politics was another. That night, the great hall was tense. Drew sat on the wooden throne, cleaned and dressed in fresh furs. Kayla sat beside him. There was no second throne, Lunas usually sat on a smaller chair. Drew had smashed the smaller chair and dragged a heavy warbench next to him so she could sit at equal height. The council of elders sat before them. 5 wolves with grey hair and eyes hard as flint. They were the keepers of the law. This is irregular, Elder Merrick said, tapping a scroll on the table. The bond is undeniable. We smell it. But Kayla is of low blood. She has no training. No lineage. She has survival, Drew countered, his hand resting on Kayla's knee under the table. She survived the blizzard. She survived the whispering caves. What training do you have, Merrick? You haven't hunted in a decade. Merrick flushed. There are traditions, Alpha. A Luna must pass the trials of the moon to prove she is fit to lead the females. If she fails, the bond remains, but she keeps no title. She remains a consort. Kayla felt Drew's hand tighten. He was about to explode. He hated the trials, ancient, barbaric tests of physical strength designed for warrior females, not healers. I will not subject her to, Drew began. I will do it, Kayla interrupted. The room went silent. Drew turned to her, shock on his face. Kayla, no. You don't know what they ask. It is combat. Endurance. I know, she said, her voice steady. She looked at Merrick. If I refuse, they will never respect me. They will say I hide behind your legs. They will say I am just a warmer for your bed. She stood up, looking small but unbreakable in the firelight. I am not just a warmer, she declared. I am the healer of the Frostfang. I know where to cut to kill, and I know where to stitch to save. Set your trials, Elder. I will pass them. Merrick smiled, a thin, cruel curving of lips. He knew something she didn't. Very well, Merrick said. The trials begin at the next full moon. 3 nights. 3 tests. He leaned forward. But be warned, child. The 3rd trial is the trial of the heart. It tests the bond itself. And many mates do not survive it intact. Drew stood, pulling Kayla behind him. If you rig this, Merrick, I will end you. It is the law of the ancestors, Merrick shrugged, but his eyes gleamed with malice. We shall see if an Omega can wear the crown. As the council dispersed, Drew turned to Kayla, gripping her shoulders. Why? He whispered. I could have forced them. You can force obedience, Kayla said softly, placing a hand on his chest. But you cannot force loyalty. I need to earn this, Drew. For me. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. But the bond between them vibrated with a new note. Not fear. Dread. In the shadows of the hall, Rurik watched, wiping mud from his face. He caught Merrick's eye. The elder nodded slightly. The trials were not meant to test her. They were meant to kill her. Chapter 16. The Trial of Blood and Root. The first night of the trials brought a biting wind that smelled of impending snow. The arena was a circle of ancient stones at the edge of the ironwood forest. The entire pack gathered, their torches flickering like judgmental eyes in the dark. Elder Merrick stepped forward, his face a mask of false neutrality. The first trial is the trial of the hunter. An alpha's mate must be able to provide. A rabid boar has been released into the sector. Kill it, and bring its heart. He threw a heavy iron spear at Kayla's feet. It was a warrior's weapon, too heavy for her slight frame. The crowd murmured. It was a setup. She was a healer, not a butcher. Drew growled low in his throat, stepping forward, but Kayla's hand shot out, gripping his forearm. Trust me, she projected through the bond. She picked up the spear. But she didn't hold it like a weapon, she used it as a walking stick. She turned and walked into the dark trees. Inside the forest, the air was thick with the scent of musk and rot. The boar was close. She could hear it crashing through the underbrush, maddened by whatever herbs Merrick had likely fed it. She didn't hunt it. She waited. She found a clearing and knelt, digging into her pouch. She pulled out a bundle of slumberweed and crushed it between her palms, releasing a pungent, sweet aroma. She smeared the paste onto the roots of a nearby tree and climbed the branches. When the boar burst into the clearing, foaming at the mouth, it was a monster of muscle and rage. It charged the scent. But as it tore at the roots, the potent sedative hit its bloodstream. Its movements slowed. The rage dulled. It collapsed, panting heavily, fighting sleep. Kayla dropped from the tree. She didn't stab it. She knelt by its head, placing her hands on its snout. She pushed her own calm, her Omega soothing energy into the beast. Sleep, she whispered. The pain is gone. The boar's eyes closed. It snored. Kayla returned to the circle, dragging the sleeping, massive beast on a makeshift sled of branches. She didn't bring a heart. She brought the whole animal, alive but subdued. She stood before Merrick, breathless but unbowed. A butcher brings you death, she announced, her voice ringing clear. A queen brings you submission. The beast lives. And it serves me. The pack went silent. Then, a slow, rhythmic clapping began. It was Drew. Chapter 17. The Poison in the Cup. The victory of the first night had rattled the conspirators. The second trial was the trial of endurance. Kayla was stripped to her shift and forced to stand in the center of the frozen lake. The ice was thick, but the air was -20 degrees. She had to remain standing until sunrise. If she fell, she failed. This is murder, Drew hissed to his guards, his eyes tracking Rurik, who was watching with a smirk from the shoreline. Drew was forbidden from interfering, bound by the ancient laws. If he stepped onto the ice, Kayla was disqualified. Hour 3 passed. Kayla's lips were blue. Shivers racked her body so violently she could barely keep her footing. Then, the sabotage hit. Before the trial, a servant had given her a warming tonic. It was laced. Kayla felt it now, not warmth, but a paralytic agent creeping up her legs. Her knees buckled. Drew, she cried out in her mind. I can't feel my legs. Drew felt her panic. He slammed his fist against the barrier post, shattering the wood. Hold on. Look at me. He stood at the very edge of the ice. He couldn't touch her physically, but he could touch her spiritually. He locked eyes with her. Open the bond, he commanded mentally. Take it. Take everything. He didn't just send encouragement, he sent fire. He visualized the heat of his own blood, the raging furnace of his alpha metabolism, and he pushed it down the invisible tether that connected them. Kayla gasped. It felt like swallowing a star. Drew's heat flooded her freezing veins, burning away the paralytic poison. It was agonizing and ecstatic. She stood straighter, steam beginning to rise from her skin as his energy metabolized the toxins. Roaric's smile vanished. He watched as the Omega, who should have been a frozen corpse, threw her head back and exhaled a cloud of hot steam. She didn't just endure, she thrived, fueled by a battery that had no limit. When the sun rose, painting the ice in pink and gold, Kayla was still standing. Drew was on his knees on the shore, exhausted, having poured his strength into her all night. She walked off the ice and collapsed into his arms. "We did it," she chattered. Halfway, he whispered into her cold hair. "One more. The mind game." Chapter 18. The Trial of the Heart. The final trial was in the Moonstone Caves. This was the one Merrick had banked on. Kayla and Drew were placed in separate chambers, divided by a wall of translucent crystal. They could see each other, but they couldn't hear. The cave was filled with hallucinogenic mist. "The test is simple," Merrick's voice echoed. "Walk away. If you leave the cave, you live. If you try to break the wall, the magic will crush you." The mist rose. The hallucinations began. For Kayla, the crystal wall changed. Drew wasn't looking at her with love. He was laughing. He was standing with a beautiful, warrior she-wolf. "You were just a warmer," the false Drew sneered. "Just the tip, remember? A beg for a moment. Who keeps a beggar?" For Drew, he saw Kayla dead. He saw her body broken on the rocks, her eyes accusing him. "You failed me. Your strength is a curse." Drew roared, slamming his fists against the crystal. "Lies." Kayla fell to her knees, sobbing. The vision was so real. The rejection played on her deepest insecurities. She turned toward the exit. It would be so easy to leave. To run back to her hut and hide. "Kayla." The voice wasn't in the air. It was in her blood. Just the tip. She froze. The hallucination faltered. That phrase. He had used it in the hut, yes. But he had redefined it. It wasn't about using her, it was about the desperation of connection. She turned back to the wall. She placed her hand against the cold surface. "You are the fire," she whispered, closing her eyes against the visions. "And I don't run from the fire." On the other side, Drew saw her hand press against the glass. The image of her dead body flickered and vanished, replaced by the reality of her palm. He pressed his hand against hers. "I am yours," he roared into the silence. They didn't walk away. They pushed. They pushed with their love, their bond, and their absolute refusal to accept the lie. The moonstone, unable to contain the resonance of a true bond fighting against it, began to crack. A spiderweb fracture appeared under their hands. Merrick, watching from the balcony, screamed. "No. That's impossible." With a sound like a thunderclap, the crystal wall shattered. It exploded outward, not harming them, but sending a shockwave of pure energy through the cavern. The mist evaporated. Drew and Kayla stood amidst the glittering shards, holding each other. They hadn't just passed the trial, they had broken the game. Chapter 19. The Alpha's Justice. The shockwave blew the doors of the cave open. The pack, waiting outside, saw their alpha and his mate emerge from a cloud of diamond dust, hand in hand. Drew didn't stop. He marched straight for Merrick and Rurik. "Treason," Drew said. The word was quiet, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "The trials." Merrick stammered, backing away. "You broke the stone. It's sacrilege." "The stone broke because it could not measure us," Kayla said, stepping forward. Her voice was different now. It held the command tone of a Luna. "You tried to poison my body. You tried to poison his mind. And you failed." Rurik drew his sword. "Kill them. They are abominations." But no one moved. The pack looked at Rurik, then at the glowing couple. They saw the truth. Drew didn't need the guards. He moved. The pent-up rage of 3 days, the blizzard, the hunt, the ice, the lies, released in a blur of violence. He disarmed Rurik with a single blow, breaking the beta's arm, and drove him to his knees. I should kill you, Drew growled, his claws extended at Rorik's throat. Do it. Rurik spat. No. Kayla's hand landed on Drew's shoulder. The pack gasped. A Luna stopping an Alpha's kill? It was unheard of. Death is too easy, Kayla said coldly. She looked at Rurik, then at the vast frozen wilderness beyond the gates. He wanted to rule? Let him rule the nothing. Exile. Drew looked at her. He saw the wisdom in it. Killing him made him a martyr. Exiling him made him a ghost. Go, Drew commanded, shoving Rurik toward the gates. If you cross the border again, I will not be the one who hunts you. She will. He pointed to Kayla. Rurik looked at the small healer who had tamed a boar and shattered stone. For the first time, he looked terrified. He scrambled up and ran into the snow. Drew turned to the pack. He took his heavy fur cloak, the mantle of the king, and draped it over Kayla's shoulders. Behold your Luna, he bellowed. One by one, the wolves fell to their knees. Not out of fear, but because the sun had finally broken through the clouds. Chapter 20, The Eternal Flame. The fortress was quiet. The celebration had lasted until dawn, but now, the heavy wooden door of the Alpha's chambers was locked. Inside, the fire roared in the hearth, echoing the first night they had met. But this time, there was no storm outside. No fear of death. Kayla sat on the edge of the massive bed, combing out her hair. Drew stood behind her, watching her in the mirror. He looked at peace. The jagged tension that had defined his face for years was smoothed away. He reached out, his fingers tracing the scar on her neck where he had marked her. Does it hurt? He asked softly. It throbs, she admitted, leaning back into his touch. Like a second heartbeat. It reminds me you are there. I am always there, he murmured. He lifted her into his arms and carried her to the center of the bed, laying her down among the furs. He hovered over her, his weight supported on his elbows. He looked at her with that same intense, hungry expression he had worn in the hut. You know, he whispered, a smirk playing on his lips. I still owe you. Owe me. Kayla raised an eyebrow, tracing the line of his jaw. I begged you for a touch. Just the tip of a finger to save my sanity. He lowered his head, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. I feel I should repay the debt. But I don't think a finger is enough anymore. Kayla laughed, a sound that was light and free. So, what are you offering, Alpha? Just the tip. Drew growled, the sound vibrating against her chest. No. No more fragments. I told you, Kayla. I want to be the fire. He kissed her then, slow, deep, and full of promises kept. It wasn't the frantic claiming of the cave, nor the desperate heat of the blizzard. It was the steady, enduring burn of a love that had walked through hell and come out holding hands. As they moved together, the scars on their bodies, his claw marks, her pale lines from the cold, began to glow with a soft, silver light. The magic of the bond, satisfied and settled, wrapped around them like a second skin. Drew pulled back, breathless, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, he whispered. The words were simple, heavy, and absolute. Kayla smiled, pulling him down until there was no space left between them. I know, she whispered back. Now, show me. The fire crackled, casting long shadows on the walls, guarding the two souls who had found their warmth in the middle of winter.